Welcome to Going Beyond Medicine with Elaine Groman. Conversations with people who are working to make a difference in our world. Now here's your host for Going Beyond Medicine on Empower Radio, Elaine Groman.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Elaine Groman on Empower Radio. The show is called Going Beyond Medicine, and today I'm going to do a little bit of a different twist in this show. Rather than having an individual as a guest, I'm just going to talk to you for this hour about something that I think would be maybe interesting and a different perspective for you to think about. In 2017, as we know, we are going to have a lot of changes in our global economy, in our economy, and most certainly in our governance. And as I was writing an article, which I do, I am a contributing writer to several blogs and an online magazine called Adiz Magazine, which talks about the strength of warrior women, and also to contributing to what's called Mogul.com, which was started by a young woman named Tiffany Pham, who's been a guest on my show. And it's www.onmogul.com. And she has 8 million viewers who listen or read her wonderful compilation of bringing women together as thought leaders to talk about various things. And I also am a contributing writer to Ask Dr. Nandy's, who is in the local market of Detroit. Partha Nandy. Dr. Partha Nandy is the WXYZ's medical advisor, and he is just known all over. So I'm very fortunate to be a writer for these various organizations, and I'm also an author working on my third book. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is, and what I enjoy talking to people about, is language. And really beginning to understand how our language is often misunderstood and therefore can mislead us in different ways. And we often don't know the origins of many of the concepts in which we live our life every day. And with the coming of the soon-to-be inauguration of President-elect Trump, one of the things that I think is a really important thing is for us to understand what democracy actually is. And so in that vein, that's what I'm going to talk about today. And a very important ancient scholarly understanding of knowledge called the circle of law, which is actually the origin of our form of democracy. If we think about our relatively recent history on the North American continent, when the United States of America was brought together as a nation, it was not an abandoned continent that we became the inhabitants of. It, for many, many tens of thousands of years, was the land upon which Native peoples lived. And for the most part, they saw this great land from all of what was now called North America and South America as one land. And in truth, they are connected. And there was certainly various tribes of people, different regions in which people had to learn how to work with their environment, work with the land, be present with the land. And they had a system that was observable and then replicable that helped to be a guide for them to learn how to govern one another and themselves. And if we think back in our own not too distant past, in my own personal life, my father was a first-generation American. His parents immigrated, my grandparents immigrated from Ireland. And many of our ancestors in our own personal history immigrated from various continents around the world and various systems of governance. And some of these systems were very feudal systems that had at its base, someone who was in the position of power and then someone who was an underling and therefore controlled by these positions of power. And certainly it was a wonderful thing to have the concept and the understanding that we want to have a democracy, but what does that actually mean? If we were to look at the word democracy and break it down into the actual letters and words, the word democracy has at the very beginning of the word D-E-M-O, demo. The term demo means to demonstrate something, to demonstrate something's workability. And I've always found that extremely curious. Why do we have this thing that we call democracy? And how do we bring it into our lives and have it be a demonstratable, observable, replicable way of doing something? And through my studies of what is called the medicine wheels, which are ancient bodies of knowledge that help people understand their autonomy, help people understand how things came to be through centuries of observation, not through theory and or hypotheses, but by actual observable ways of seeing how creation created this world in which we live. And so I was thinking about this as I was preparing to write an article about the demonstration of democracy and how is it demonstratable. And I was curious, and I was brought to look at what is called the United States Shield, the shield of the United States of America, and the symbolism behind that, and to look at it perhaps with a different eye. As an artist, for many years, I made my living as an artist. And as a trained designer, I look at what is the symbolism behind things that we hold dear as symbols of ourselves. And as we see in our world now, there's a lot of challenges that are being brought up constantly. And there is the group of the haves and the have-nots, those that have what they need to have a comfortable life, food, shelter, clothing, safety, freedom, and those who don't. And why is that, and how is that possible? When we live on the same planet, we have all the same resources, but we don't use them always equitably. Well, the circle of law, which was an ancient and is still and is coming forward now, is a workable form of democracy. Actually, there was our form of democracy, believe it or not, was lifted from this medicine wheel called the circle of law. What do I mean by that? Have you ever considered why people in positions of authority are referred to as chiefs? Why are they not referred to as a lord or a king or a queen? Because this circle of law had around its council circle chiefs. And each position in a circle represented what creation represented: north, south, east, west, and then the secondary directions. Every council, every wheel had balance, was designed to see how creation created balance. And in this particular very important circle, medicine wheel, the circle of law, its entire purpose was to maintain balance. So with that being said, every position on the wheel had two people in that position. Both of them were chiefs of equal stature, and one was a woman and one was a man. Never was there just exclusively men or exclusively women. There was always representations of both parts of humanity, male and female. They were elected or appointed by the group that they represented because of the fact that they distinguished themselves as being very clear and very honest in the representation of whatever it is their position was on the medicine wheel. And these chiefs held their position for 4 years, which is interesting if we look at the comparison of what we refer to as democracy and where this concept came from of holding a position for 4 years. If you imagine in your mind, or if you're sitting somewhere where you could draw a circle, I would suggest that you do so. Draw a circle. And if you were to look at a circle as a map, always in the upper part of a circle, if you were looking at a map, would be the position of the north. So in your mind or on this piece of paper, write N for the representation of north. In the immediate opposite of that would be the south. In the right side of the circle would be the east, and then by definition, the left would be west. So then we have what is called the secondary positions on the wheel, which would be in the upper right-hand corner around the 2 o'clock position would be the northeast. In the lower right quadrant would be the southeast. In the left lower quadrant would be the southwest, and the upper left quadrant would be the northwest. So as you see these 8 spokes, imagine this is a place on the medicine wheel where 2 individuals would sit in a circle, very intentionally in a circle, so that all could see one another. To be able to speak to one another in an open situation, not behind closed doors, so that all people in the positions of that chief position could hear what everyone had to talk about. And interestingly, in the center of that circle was both a fire for illumination and also for the symbolism of what was referred to as speaking across the fire, which meant that as you spoke your words had to be able to be stand the test of the fire, which means you're speaking across the fire with the sincere obligation that what you were saying was what you believed to be the truth. So that there was no manipulation, there was no backhanded deals, there was no sleight of hand, there was truth. And along with the fire in the center of the circle were 4 what were referred to as presiding chiefs. The presiding chiefs are, in our form of democracy, now called the president. Each one of these positions around the fire, which are people that are referred to as chiefs in governance, were actually people who represented various parts of their village, various parts of their tribe. And when a council came together, they were there for open conversation with the intention of making things workable for the preservation of the tribe. Now, the presiding chiefs had one very important, actually 2 very important roles that our president currently also has. And that role is veto power. The president does not enact a law. The president vetoes a law. He does not have an actual vote. And the second thing that is very different from what is currently things enacted in law, there was a very important position that these and authority that these presiding chiefs upheld, and that is that no law would be enacted if it did not protect the lives of women and children. Now, wouldn't that be interesting if our form of governance made the pledge to never enact a law that did not protect the lives of women and children? Now, why would they have known that that was important? Because they understood that without the protection of women and children, the tribe would cease to be. Because it was more likely that the women would actually survive. Why? Because men were more likely to die in battle, die out in the elements, die out of the dangerous job of hunting wild game. And since they were putting themselves in peril, the men were not the carriers of high information. Women were, because they were the ones most likely to survive. And for obvious reasons, the preservation of children and the life and the sanctity of children was paramount, because after all, we all start our lives as babies. And we grow through the governance and the care of those that are protecting our lives. So I find it very interesting when I began to study this very ancient wheel called the Circle of Law, how we flippantly in our conversations talk about democracy without really understanding what it is. And then my attention was drawn to the seal of the coat of arms of the United States of America. And I was very intrigued by looking at the symbolism, again, from an artist's view. There's ancient symbols represented here. And many times people don't understand their symbolism. E pluribus unum means under one, all for one, all as one. And we are one tribe of humanity, without which the embodiment of a man and the embodiment of a woman, we could not be. So we have to look at ourselves as equal parts of the whole, very importantly. So interestingly, as I did some research on the coat of arms, and let me back up and say, when in the Circle of Law, when someone brought to the attention, and anyone could bring to the attention the circle, and they could call the circle together, they could pose a question about something that they felt needed to be an enacted law, which meant a law was something that would be not a rule, punishable, but a guidance for moving forward. And when a law was agreed upon, it was agreed that that law would be revisited at any time if they saw that the law was not workable. And the symbol of a law was an arrow. So they would do what's called strike an arrow. And with the symbolism of an arrow being one directional, or having a direction in which it is aimed. Now, looking back even further at the symbolism of an arrow, and the reason for the presiding chiefs having as their goal the protection of females as those who carry life within their body and have the capacity to nurture another life from their body, that was always seen as someone very sacred, someone needing to be protected. And makes a lot of sense. And also, it was, most people don't realize that arrows and those people that were archers, especially the most talented archers, were often women. Why? Because women did not have the strength of physical prowess that a man would have, And so they needed something that could move swiftly through time and space and be used at a distance. So men often would use physical tools that would put them in contact with something directly. A knife, a club, something of that nature. But a woman would not necessarily have the strength and or the ability to move as swiftly or carry as much as a man. So the archers were the women. And they could become very agile, and their point would be taken, and that point would be used to protect themselves and their families and loved ones. So it's interesting that an arrow, or several arrows, 13 arrows to be exact, are held in the left claw of an eagle. An eagle in the Native American medicine, meaning understanding of our intimate relationship with all living things, an eagle is always seen as an honorable bird. It is a bird that has the capacity to see and hover at great distances and to see the vastness of territory. And symbolically, they could be elusive, but they always had this clearness about them, this ability to see at great distances. And so when the symbol of the eagle is used, it is also emblematic of being able to look beyond the obvious, to see strategically in all directions of what might happen, what is out there, what is the scope of which we're trying to work in our world. And also in the symbol of the seal, the coat of arms of the United States, in the right claw of the eagle is an olive branch. Why an olive branch? Because in ancient times, it was the symbol of peace. So in the various explanations that I was able to find on the internet, it said that it represented war and peace. True, it does. But also what it does not clarify is that it also represented the peace chiefs and the war chiefs. Each had a position. There was a position of the peace chief and the position of the war chief, who always sat opposite one another on the medicine wheel, on this medicine wheel called the Circle of Law. Because the medicine of a peace chief made the pledge that they would never, ever take a human life. If they accidentally took took the life of a human through some kind of circumstance, they would step down as a peace chief of their own volition. They wouldn't be impeached. They would do it because it was the right thing to do. By contrast, a war chief would pledge their life to fight to the death to preserve the life of the women and the children of the tribe. Not to take the life of a woman or a child, but to preserve it. And they would do so no matter what. So, and we are going to take a break in just a few minutes, and I'm going to talk about some of their various other positions on the medicine wheel called the Circle of Law. And just to give us something else to think about as we look into what we call democracy, so that we can begin to reframe our thinking, so that we can be more able to respond instead of simply reacting, as we so often do. And recognize that our world does not need to be divisive. And that there was at a time in our human history that we actually knew how to work together as human beings, men and women, cross-culturally, cross the fire. Again, this is Elaine Groman on Going Beyond Medicine on Empower Radio, and I'm talking about the very important ancient medicine wheel called the Circle of Law. We'll continue when I come back. Thank you.
Now back to Elaine Groman and Going Beyond Medicine on Empower Radio. EmpowerRadio.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is Elaine Groman, and this is Going Beyond Medicine on Empower Radio. And today I've just taken a little bit of a digression from the normal platform of my show, and instead of having a guest in this episode, I'm just talking about some really deep information that I have actually been asked to do some episodes that are just me talking and helping people to understand some things in perhaps a different way, or to give them a different viewpoint. And today I'm talking about an ancient medicine wheel called the Circle of Law. As we are now fully preparing to step into a new group of leaders in 2017, we have an opportunity to look at more closely, what do we choose to do? How do we choose to be? How do we choose to behave in this seemingly very tumultuous time? And I think that it's wise to look back on things that were put in place in the past that actually were really beautiful examples of workability and true democracy. And democracy, if you look at the word, means something that is demonstratable, to demonstrate a workability. And I'm talking today about the Circle of Law, which was the medicine wheels. Let me back up and say the medicine wheels are a body of knowledge that builds upon itself. It's not theory. It's not hypothesis. It was gathered over many, many centuries of observation of how creation created itself. But then this particular medicine wheel, the Circle of Law, looked at those guiding principles of how creation allows balance to be present in our world every day, and has done so for tens of millions of years, so that this planet can further and grow and prosper. And by association, we as humans on this planet can grow and prosper. But we've kind of grossly digressed from that understanding, and have kind of devolved into being very against one another. And we have done so historically, unfortunately, for a long period of time. And I think it might be really wise to look at that and think, why are we doing that? What is it benefiting us? And if it isn't benefiting us, maybe it's time to rethink it. So in the Circle of Law, the unique thing about this circle is that it is indeed a circle. There is no aisles that people need to talk across. There is no seclusion of one party over the other, but there is true collaboration of trying to find workable, malleable solutions, and to see if they work, and if they don't work, to literally what's called break the arrow, to scrap that idea and come up with a better idea. And we have found that we have made laws that really aren't very workable, and then we uphold these laws knowing that they're not workable. And we're kind of stuck in that. We have to learn how to break the arrow, not break the law, but break the arrow, which means to review something and say, does this even work anymore? If it doesn't work, let's rethink it. So in the Circle of Law, there are 8 positions on the wheel, technically 9 positions, but around the perimeter of the circle are 8 places in which people would sit as chiefs. And as I said in the first half of the hour, we often hear words all the time, but we don't really stop to think about, where did that word come from? And how is it that people in positions of authority in both governance and in corporations, etc., are called chiefs of something? the chief executive officer, the chief operating officer, the chief this, the chief that. Well, the term chief was a representation of someone who held power and dignity for a purpose, because they had proven their authority and their ability to lead, where in feudal systems, people were just given positions of a kingdom or a princehood or whatever by simply hereditary alone or by overtaking something. Well, we don't have to look very far to see that has caused a lot of bloodshed across this world. So going back to this circle of law, the amazing thing about it is they always did it with the understanding that we're talking about human life here. And if we're going to talk about human life here, we have to bring both parts of that which makes human life to the table, if you will, to the circle, if you will, and that is men and women in equal numbers. So in a very important position in the circle of law, in the position of the West, was the only place where two women would sit. And in the North, in the position of the North on the medicine wheel, is the only place where two men would sit. But still, there was 8 women and 8 men across the entire circle. Now, in the position of the West, there was 2 women, which was called the women's circle. And in order to be a chief sitting in that circle, there was something very important that had to be observable about you as a woman. You had to either be pregnant with a child and or have children that were very young. Those are the only women that could sit in the women's circle in the West. And in the position of the North were the hunters and warriors, were always 2 men, because they were the ones who hunted chiefly, and they were the ones who were the warriors chiefly. So they sat in that position. And as I had mentioned, in the center of the circle were the presiding chiefs, and they would have a fire there. And the fire was not only for warmth and illumination, but for a symbol of speaking across the fire, which meant that your words would be true, your words would be heartfelt, and your words would have been thought about. They weren't reactionary. And the position of the women's circle was perhaps the most important in the circle of law, because the whole purpose of the circle of law was to preserve the life going forward of the tribe. And since women were the only beings capable of holding life within their body, they were seen as very sacred. Sacred not in like holy, like we think of saints, but in whole beings. And also the female human body has the capacity to produce a life-giving fluid in the form of breast milk that would actually wholly sustain the life of another human being as it was growing. A man's body couldn't do that. So they saw and they recognized the uniqueness of the female and pledged to preserve it. Because otherwise, the reality is, there's madness otherwise. Yesterday, I had the incredible opportunity to attend an event, and this show is being taped today, which is January, what day are we having today? January 13th. And January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We have gone so far afield of understanding the sacredness of a female human body that human trafficking is now the greatest, most rapidly expanding financial criminal enterprise on the planet. We have gone so far afield of understanding that if you destroy the female human being, you destroy the human race. And we need to really look at coming back at how do we preserve life honorably. And this is something we as men and women need to look at collectively. Why have we gone so far from what is common sense about our life? So the position of the West, as I said, was the position where the women sat that were either pregnant or about, or who had just given birth and were lactating, meaning their body was sustaining the life of another. And at that time, all life was sustained generally by breast milk, not through some pasteurized, homogenized thing that came in a can, but from the human body itself. And so that honored that place. And also around the circle were various other positions. As I said, there was the position of the healers. The healers were those people who understood and studied and devoted their life to understanding all of the processes and gifts that Mother Earth had given to us that could help to preserve our life. So the healers were the herbalists. They were the ones who understood what is safe to eat, what is safe to, or what is important to avoid, how certain things could be used in combination to take care of challenges that the human might experience, because certainly people got injured, people got into disagreements, people were injured in accidents. Men certainly took their life, had to be prepared so that they did not lose their life in trying to take down a buffalo or some other kind of creature that would be used to feed the planet or feed the tribe. So certainly they had to understand that people had birth pain, they had growing pain, they had challenges of injury and the pain that could precede someone upon death. So the healers sat in a very important position because they understood the connection of the natural world and as it provides gifts to us to sustain life. Very important position. So in conversations that I've had with other people on the show, particularly healers, just earlier today I was talking with a dear friend, Nancy Judge, when we were talking about what does healing mean? What does energy mean? What does all this mean? And it isn't new age, it's actually ancient wisdom, ancient understanding, ancient respect for life. Another interesting thing that we have not really known about very much or kind of dismissed is the notion of a clown. I was surprised to learn that the concept of a clown was actually a Native American tradition, not the characters that we see at a circus, but a clown was intended to mirror back to us our own actions. So there's a beautiful book that I just recently read. It's called Daughters of Copper Woman. And it is the mythology and the stories of life as a woman in the Pacific Northwest and how women were actually worked together collaboratively to have ways of looking at the challenges that women faced in life and how to help them overcome it. So why I refer to that is because that's where I heard for maybe the third time about what a clown was, and it really, finally I got it. What they would do is a person who was a clown was not a jokester. Every tribe had clowns, and it was a very serious job. A clown would follow an individual and replicate their behavior if their behavior was less than stellar. So for instance, if a guy was walking around and he was a bit of a bully, for instance, the clown would follow that man and replicate what he was doing so that he could see what he looked like from other people's point of view. The same would be true of a woman. If she was jealous or judgmental or a little bit hoity, a female clown would walk around her, by her, and mimic her in the intention of helping someone see what they looked like. Today we use that in comedy and we think it's funny. It's really meant to be a learning tool. And they actually had what was called the Women's Circle, which is different than the Women's Circle of the Circle of Law. There was Women's Circle that would give women, and men had the same thing, but women had a circle in which they could come to safely talk about whatever it is that was bothering them. But there was one caveat. They could only come 3 times and talk about the same thing 3 times in a row. In other words, it wasn't just a complaining place. It wasn't just a place to come and sit and gossip or complain about something. If that individual had not, by the 3rd time, come to some conclusion about what they might do about it to rectify the problem, the people would turn around and walk away. Because what they were given was an opportunity to hear their own problem. And then by the 3rd time, they had to have come to some semblance of an understanding of what they could do about the problem. It wasn't just a place where someone would come and gossip. It wasn't just a place where someone would come and complain. It wasn't a therapy session. It was an action session. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to make this right? If it isn't working, make it right. If it isn't workable, stop trying to make it work. Well, many people didn't know that in Native American culture, there was such a thing as a divorce, which meant they looked at the feasibility of a relationship and actually whether it worked or not. And if it didn't work, it was the woman who had the choice to put the male's moccasins outside of her teepee. That was a declaration of divorce. So it wasn't a name calling. It was an invitation for him to find a more workable partner. It was an invitation to other women who were not married to find whether this individual was more suitable for them. So it was workable. It wasn't name calling. It wasn't dragging somebody's name into the mud. It was not seeing everything that you could do to defame or to knock down someone's character. It was a declaration of the truth that something wasn't working for whatever reason, trying to keep judgment out of it and just say, I love you enough to let you go. I love myself enough to let you go. And it was workable models. Perhaps it's time to revisit these kind of workable models. So in thinking about the things and the challenges that people have now in the coming administration, and when people come to me as a healer or as someone wanting to talk out potential options, I always ask people, what do you choose to do here? Do you choose to follow the rhetoric of saying this guy is bad or that guy is bad or this has been this or this has been that? Or would you rather look at it and say, this doesn't work, this doesn't work for me. What might I do better? What might I do better to maybe not follow in the gossip of the he said, she said, but rather to be response-able in your own life? Because all of the medicine wheels that are built upon one another, and we're a very democratic, truly democratic way of looking at life and seeing that we are responsible for our lives, and we're responsible for everything we do and say and think and act, that we then become it is very possible for us to become self-leaders and self-responsible and self-directed. Because as we look in our world, it's easy now for people to say, well, so-and-so didn't do this, the Democrats didn't do this, and the Republicans didn't do that. But how are we learning how to talk across a fire? How are we able to literally sit in a circle together instead of on different party lines, crossing different party lines? I'll never forget one time I had the opportunity to go to Lansing. I'm in Michigan, for those of you who are not in Michigan. And to sit in and watch people in a discussion in the Capitol building. And I was shocked when I saw that people would use someone called a page to literally speak to someone on the opposite side of their position. They wouldn't even talk to them. It was so crazy to me. I couldn't understand it. How could grown adults actually ever get anything done without looking at one another as fellow human beings on this journey together in this very sacred time called a life, however long that happens to be, however long you're blessed to live, and make it as workable as possible instead of as challenging as possible. Perhaps it's time to start to think about that differently. You know, as I'm looking at my computer screen here, I see again the seal, the coat of arms of the United States. And above the eagle, who has its wings spread out and its talons out, grasping the arrows and the laurel leaf or whatever that is. I can't remember the word right off the top of my head for a second. The olive branch, excuse me. Above its head is a constellation of stars, which I think is very unique. Why is it stars in a heavens in the shape of a circle? And some people say it represents the 13 colonies. But if you were to look at where this form of democracy actually came from, the symbol in a very important medicine wheel that I hope to share with you at another time is called the 4 powers of the human self. Excuse me, that's not the right one. It is the Children's Earth Count is the name of that circle. The symbol of a human is a star. So above the head of the eagle is a constellation of stars. And if we think about symbolically what was referred to as the Vitruvius Man, the illustration by Leonardo da Vinci of the man standing with his legs out and his arms outstretched, you see the 5-pointed star, the symbol of a human. What we need to remember is this great seal of the coat of arms of the United States has above the head of the eagle that which can see far and wide, a symbol in the form of a circle. Above the head of this eagle, the stars that represent humanity. We need to keep in the forefront of our mind, in the thinking mind, the mind of our human species, that is of which we are all a part, which is this tribe called humanity. We are men and women that make together the whole of humanity. And we have diverged so far from what it means to be whole, to know what it means to be protective of our lives as men and women, to no longer see anyone as less than. Because in truth, that is not democracy, that is feudalism. And we fled various countries to come to this land to try to impart and live free. But we need to work at it. We need to know what freedom actually is and to offer that freedom to all of us, because Mother Earth has constantly given to us all that we actually need to sustain our life. And it's we, as the humans, the two-legged ones, who cause all the consternation and the trouble and the war and the problems in the world. The animals don't do that. The elders in the form of sentient beings like the trees and the rivers don't do that. We do that. And I just wanted to give you some food for thought as we begin this new administrative time of 2007 under leadership that we want to help really be its best self, even when it doesn't appear to be. So I want to thank you for your time and listening today. I am Elaine Groman. This is Going Beyond Medicine on Empower Radio, and Empower Radio does just that. It strives to empower us in what we do, in who we are, so that we are our best selves, no matter where we travel on this beautiful globe. And I'm going to continue to bring people to the airwaves that help to change the way we think, hopefully for the better. I hope you have a great week, and I will be talking to you soon.